Welcome to Chapter 4, book of 2Chronicles. I had a few glitches in chapters 1, 2, and 3. The hard drive that I have sort of filled up and it truncated, stopped, made out of sync some of the videos towards the end, and so I'm not going to go through them all again. I have to apologize for that. We also had a interesting day yesterday. It was the day of the great eclipse. It came right over our house, started. I sat out in my front deck of the Apostolic Bible building and here and looked up, and it was really interesting as everything started to it didn't really start to change all of a sudden. It was as the sun became eclipsed by the moon. It was a little bit foggy where I was living. I was afraid we wouldn't be able to see anything. I'm right on the ocean, and we had the glasses, and as I looked, moon kept going across, and the sliver kept getting smaller and smaller till it was almost just a tiny little sliver of light. But yet, without the glasses that I had, the light was just really fairly, it was like a cloudy day. It didn't really stop. But then all of a sudden, when it completely eclipsed, it turned dark. I mean, like night. I couldn't believe how dark it was. I took pictures. And then the moon turned into a black disk. It was just really the most amazing natural phenomenon I've ever seen. I'm 77 years old. Now, I don't mean it's more amazing than animals, but some type of a celestial thing like that. It was the most amazing thing I've seen. And I've got some pictures. I'll put them up on my website. And then in the first, the second chapter, I believe, where I mentioned that I said Solomon was an old man. I meant David was an old man, and I couldn't think of the woman that he was with, and was Abishag, who became a wife, but the marriage was never consummated. They had her be with him to warm him up, basically, and then I didn't have the size of the cubit. A cubit is 18 inches, so whenever you see a cubit, then if it's 20 cubits, then it'd be 20, and then the half of 20 is 10, so it'd be 30 cubits. I think I got that right. Hopefully, I'm not the greatest mathematician in the world. Probably would go down as the worst. So, now we're at chapter 4, and it began, and he made an altar of brass. 20 cubits was the length, and 20 cubits the breadth, and 10 cubits high. That would be a 30-foot by 30-foot by 15-foot. I found really a great picture on the internet, so I thought I would show that to you. Have to find it here. There it is. So there's the altar of brass. And there's the temple we mentioned, the columns we mentioned before. And we'll go through in this chapter of all these other things on the outside, and this bathing tub down here. So that altar of brass was that part where they priests burn the burnt offering. And then he made the cast sea. And when it means cast, it means it's made out of bronze. They dig a mold in the ground and make it look as close to what they want it to look like, and they pour this cast molten hot bronze into the mold, and then it cools. They let it cool naturally, and then take it out and then clean it up, trim it, and they have the casting. And it was 10 cubits in diameter, so that's 15 feet in diameter from its lip to its lip. It's globular roundabout. You can look at that picture. It's probably a pretty good representation. And 5 cubits was the height, so that would be like 7.5 feet. And the circumference, 30 cubits encircled it round about, which would by 30 and a half, 15 would be 45. And a representation of calves was underneath it, round about, encircling it, and that's in that picture. Deca in a cubit encircling the sea round about. Now, I'm not sure 10 in a cubit encircling the sea round about. I'm not sure what that means, but with 2 rows of cast oxen, and they're being cast in a furnace by this Hiram from Tyre, in which they made them. And standing upon 12 calves was the sea. And they call it a sea. It's a bowl, like a spa, and this is what it's called, the sea. And the 3, thalas, thalactic, as a derivative, means something of the sea. The 3 were looking north, and the 3 were looking west, and the 3 were looking south, and the 3 were looking towards the east. Tris, 3. Tri is the English derivative. And the Anatolas, we have Anatolia is Turkey today. It meant the east, and the thalassa was upon them upward on these oxen. And their posteriors, rear ends, were towards the inside of the bowl. And its thickness was a palm, so a palm would be that wide, so it's fairly thick. And its lip was as a lip of a cup. Well, now we're not exactly a poteriu, what a cup looked like in that period of time, but some type of a lip, probably bent over. And having been carved of buds of a lily, and having a capacity of 3,000 measures. And these metritas is, in the dictionary I looked up, about 9/10 of an English gallon, and a U.S. gallon is 1.2. So it's about a gallon. So it's like 3,000 gallons. And he completed it. And he made 10 bathing tubs. Deca, we have the decade, came English derivative. And put Pente, a pentagon, a 5-sided building in Washington, D.C., for the Defense Department. He put 5 at the right and 5 from the left. And you can see those tubs, I believe, in that picture. And that was to wash in them the works of the whole burnt offering. So I guess they would slaughter the animals and clean them off in these tubs. From what I gather, we have ergonomics. It has to do with working. And to rinse off in them, not themselves, but the animals, that with the meat. But the sea was for the washing of the priests in it. So there it makes a differentiation of these 10 tubs and the sea. And he made the lampstands of gold, 10, and apparently there are 7 lamps on the lampstand. It was all of gold. Everything was gold. 10 of them, according to their distinguishing manner. And he put them in the temple, 5 at the right and 5 from the left. So in the picture there. And he made 10 tables and put them in the temple, 5 at the right and 5 at the left. Now these, somehow these tables, 10 tables, replaced the single table of the showbread that was in the tabernacle. And so now they have 10, and they distributed the breads on these tables. Excuse me. And he made 100 gold bowls. Put, I suppose, water, flour, whatever, in the bowls. And he made the courtyard of the priests, and the great courtyard, and the doors for the courtyard. And their doorways were being brazed in brass. So there must have been beautiful brass doorways. And the doorway is an opening where he had walls on, well, you had the floor, and then you had 2 walls and a ceiling type of a thing, maybe a couple of feet thick. And the door was inside of that. It's not like our doors where it's right, almost the same thickness as the wall. Not in those days. The doorway was much wider. And the sea he put at the corner of the house at the right towards the east of the part towards the south. So I guess southeast, and I think it has that in that picture. And Hiram made the kettles and the meat hooks and the censers. And the kettles and the meat hooks to boil the foods and so forth, and the censers are for the incense. And Hiram completed doing all the work which he did for Solomon the king in the house of God, making 2 columns, and these 2 columns were about 50 feet high with the capitals, and the capitals upon the tops of the 2 columns. And these were all made out of bronze. They were cast. And 2 lattice works to cover up the 2 pommels of the capitals, which are upon the tops of the columns. Now, exactly what all this is, lattice work, I'm not sure if that was made out of brass also and hooked together to the columns and the capitals. And the other place, a pommel, 2 pommels of the capitals, but it's also a base. So, because we have vasis, and it means a base. So some type of a base for the capitals, which were on top of the columns. So, maybe that picture has a better representation than what I'm trying to come up with. And the pomegranates of gold, 400. Now, pomegranates are about the size of an apple, so that's a lot of gold. 400 for the 2 latticed works, and 2 kinds of pomegranates on the 1 lattice work to cover the 2 bases. See, here's that same word as up here. Lattice, where is it at? Pommels, vasis 939, 2 bases to cover the 2. I probably should have put pommels there because that would have made it agree. Well, sorry. The 2 bases of the capitals which are upon the columns, the 2 pommels. I have to change that for the next edition if I live long enough. And he made the bases, and that's a Jewish word, and it's just, I translated it into English, mekanoth, but it's not a Greek word. It has Greek letters, but it's just a transliteration into Greek letters. Greek has no such word. It's mekanoth. It's Hebrew, the way it sounds. 10. And the bathing tubs he made upon the mekanoth. So these bathing tubs went on some type of a base. See, now here mekanoth is a base. And the 1C and the 12 calves underneath it, and the kettles and the meat hooks and the bowls, even all their items which Hiram made. And he brought to King Solomon in the house of the Lord, Vasali, king, basilica, derivative, all of pure brass, halku. We have a Chalcolithic era, Bronze Age brass. Probably should be all pure bronze. I'm not exactly sure when bronze becomes brass and brass becomes bronze. If it's used for both, generally brass is a heavy, it's forged, like it mentions all these, but then brass can also be made and not so much forged as I suppose it could be, but those pomegranates, I don't know if they were forged or if they were bronze or not. Something to check into. In the place round about the Jordan, the king cast them, well, he didn't do it himself or had them cast, in the thick earth between Succoth and between Zeradatha. So it's over by the Jordan. I suppose the ground there was very hard, and they were able to make these molds. And Solomon made all these items in multitude exceedingly, a lot. For the scale weight of the brass was not wanting. He had plenty of it. And Solomon made all the items of the house of the Lord. Now, I don't remember saying anything about the incense altar in here. It's interesting. Maybe it mentions it here later. Even the altar of gold and the tables. Now, see, it mentions those, but in the sea, and the lampstands, and the tables, and upon them were breads of the place setting. The Bibles call them the showbread, I think the King James, and I call it the place setting. And the lampstands and the lamps for the light. There were these likneus were on the likneas. The lamps were on the lampstands, 7 of them to each one. For the light, the photos, we have photic derivative, according to the distinguishing manner. In front of the dabir were of pure gold, and I think it's a holy place, the dabir. And their lamps, and their tongs, and their bowls, and the incense pans, and the censers were of pure gold. Wow, a lot of wealth to Solomon. And the inner door of the house, which is in the Holy of the Holies, and the doors of the house of the temple were in gold. Now, there's a veil. So now, the door of the inner house, I'm not sure what that's referring to, which is in the Holy of the Holies, because there's a veil there and a doorway, possibly. I don't know, but it doesn't have theridas. And the doors of the house of the temple were in gold. So anyway, it was all in gold. So the completion of the house of the Lord is almost done. Chapter 5 will continue with the completion and Solomon and the people dedicating the house. Hope you'll join us in chapter 5 and continue learning about the Temple of Solomon. God bless.